Good evening. I'm Mary Watson, Executive Dean at the New School, and it's my distinct pleasure to welcome you here tonight to the New School and to the New York Times Talks. This event is part of an ongoing partnership that we have with the New York Times Talks, and I'd like to note that this is our 45th event of this type together with the New York Times. In collaboration with the New York Times, we recognize and celebrate the great history of the Times Talks themselves, but also of the New School, a legendary progressive university founded in 1919 with the idea that dialogue and discourse and learning should be open and free and engaging and should matter to the pressing issues of the day. Now, nearly 100 years later, the New School has expanded its mission to include design and social research, to study contemporary issues including democracy, urbanization, technological change, economic empowerment, sustainability, migration, and globalization. We aim and are the intellectual and creative center for effective engagement in the world. We're very excited about this talk tonight, and I want to note that on this very stage, we've had many storied talks that have preceded tonight's talk, including talks by people including Frank Lloyd Wright, by Martin Luther King Jr., who did a series in the 1960s on race in the US, and many other storied individuals. We're very excited for this evening's performance. So thank you to the New York Times and to Pam Tillis here at the New School for arranging this, and welcome to all of you who are joining us here by live stream. And now it's my pleasure to welcome Michelle Gray, the Director of Programming at the Times Talk.
Thank you, Dean Watson, and our longtime collaborators, the New School. And a special thank you to tonight's sponsor of the Times Talks event, the Cultural Council of Palm Beach County. I'm Michelle Gray, the Director of Programming for the New York Times live conversation series Times Talks, which pairs New York Times journalists with the brightest and boldest creative minds from the fields of film, theater, music, art, fashion, literature, and science. I'm thrilled to welcome you to tonight's event with Annie Leibovitz, one of the greatest observers of the contemporary world, capturing the personalities of the past half-century in images that are both influential and intimate. Leibovitz is here to discuss her newly published book of portraits, which portray artists, writers, actors, politicians, athletes, royals, activists, and others who have shaped the times we live in. Moderating tonight's conversation is Chief Fashion Critic at the New York Times, Vanessa Friedman. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Vanessa Friedman and Annie Leibovitz.
Okay. Okay, thanks everyone. There'll be a lot more time for cheering Annie on later, and I will be part of that. We're actually going to do something slightly different this time. Surprise. Normally we start out sitting in these chairs and talking, but Annie and I were talking earlier this week, and it became increasingly clear that there was no way to understand the work that's in this book and what she's doing now without understanding where it came from and what came before. So to start us off, some context from Annie Leibovitz.
Thank you, Vanessa. So the new book is the third in a series that covers the work I've done over the last 47 years, and I'm still very much a working photographer, and I don't mean these books to be retrospectives. Retrospectives always seem to be like the end of something, and for me, the books are just a way to take a look at what I've been working on and to think about it. I'd like to read a little bit from the afterword in the book, if I may. All my life, I've looked at and been influenced by photography books. Henry Cartier-Bresson's The Decisive Moment, Robert Frank's The Americans, Diane Arbus's magazine work, Richard Avedon's Observations, and Nothing Personal, L'Artique's Diary of a Century. I remember the art director, Bea Feither, telling me how she and Avedon created the story in L'Artique's book. I was lucky to have had several years with Bea. She said that you will learn the most from looking back at your work, and by looking back, you will discover how to go forward. I published a book that covered the first 20 years I worked 1970 to 1990, and later I made A Photographer's Life, 1990 to 2005, which included the years I was with Susan Sontag. A Photographer's Life is the only book I ever made that combines personal pictures with assignment work on a nearly equal basis. They collide and converge. Susan had just died, my father had died, my 3 children were being born. I was emotionally raw. And perhaps because of that, the personal material became the most prominent element in the book. So Susan is here standing at the entrance to the ruins of Petra in Jordan in 1994. Susan loved art, architecture, history, travel, surprises, discovery. She knew so much, but she always wanted to find out about something that she didn't know before. And if you were lucky, you were with her when that happened. Susan working in Berlin. Susan working in Sarajevo during the siege. My parents. A very familiar view of my parents. My mother. Sarah being born. Susan was a party animal. Susan returning from Seattle. My father's death. My mother and her sisters, Susan and Samuel. The photographs of my children presented a dilemma for me, and after A Photographer's Life was published, I realized what that kind of exposure means. I didn't stop seeing, but I stopped consciously taking those kinds of pictures. I made a conscious effort to live my life with my children and not put the camera between me and them. I realized that what I wanted to do was concentrate more on my portraits. Now, I don't lack portrait assignments, but I began trying a little harder to persuade editors to give me the subjects I want, and sometimes I would go off on my own. Vanessa?
It's a pretty big jump from those extraordinarily moving, very personal pictures to Kim and Kanye. But I was fascinated because in reading your book, you know, one of the points you make is that the period it covers from 2006 to 2015 represents a kind of moment in the culture. And, you know, I think some of the pictures, particularly in the beginning, that we're going to look at are sort of real cultural moments. So I wonder if you could, you know, talk about that in the context of what you just said about persuading editors to let you pick the people you're interested in.
Well, I think when you think about this next collection of work, which is 2005 to 2016, it was really about realizing that I wasn't going to you know, put my family and my friends in this position again, and I wanted to really concentrate on the assignment work. And in this book, you'll see work on an updating on the Women's Project. You'll see a series on artists that I started, you know, emulating Alexander Lieberman's, you know, visiting, you know, an artist studio. And then I also, there's pictures from Pilgrimage. which is a project that I did of places and objects that have to do with people that no longer, are with us. And those photographs are kind of used in this series of pictures as punctuation. The book and the Women's Project were opportunities to, for example, to photograph Malala, who I wanted to photograph, and didn't have that opportunity to do it for any of the magazines that I was working for. And I went off and did that for the Women's Project. And yeah.
So when you put together disparate work like that, works that are personal projects, political projects, magazine projects, does it make you think about the entirety of your production in a different way?
Sure. Vanessa, I've been doing it for 47 years, and I'm very aware now of the history that's involved in the work. And I'm very conscientious and responsible to that. And I have these incredible vehicles, Vanity Fair, Vogue, and in its day, Rolling Stone, to create this work where I feel I have more of a voice in my books. I mean, books are so important. So this has an incredible pagination. The story on this book is that it really was put together, a little over a year ago. I was finishing up an installation for Arl on my early work, 1970 to 1983. And I was thinking of all the work I had and had accumulated since I had done Photographer's Life. And I thought it was time to look at it. It also happened to be, it was August, and Phaidon was, I think there's some people from Phaidon here. They were extremely brave. They just jumped into it. Can you imagine deciding to do a book in September a year ago, and then, throwing it together and, basically going to press in June. So it was almost like doing a magazine more than a book, to do something this fast. And one of the reasons I really wanted to do it was that it was August. It was 3 months before the election. And I thought, I could see the ending of the book. The ending of the book was going to be Hillary Clinton, in the Oval Office. And that was going to be the end. That was, I was figuring out it was going to be kind of the last picture we would take. We would just get it in there. And I was thinking, oh my God, I wonder if we can get Eleanor Roosevelt's desk. And, I was plotting it all out. And
then instead we got...
we all got a little rocked. I mean, it was topsy-turvy. I mean, really topsy-turvy. I remember after the election... In November, I called Deb Aronson at Phaidon and said, I can't do the book. I don't have an ending for this story anymore. It's like, it was so devastating. It really was. Do you want me to click on to something else?
Yeah. I was going to say, why don't you click on to...
Oh, yes, here we go.
This is what we got.
This is our First Lady. And our president. At the time, I think it was just a little bit about, honestly, these things were just there, not the people, the objects. And we met the Trumps, Phyllis Posnick from Vogue, and I met the Trumps on the tarmac, and they were going back to New York, and their plane was there, and I just looked at this entrance to the plane. I couldn't believe it. And Phyllis Posnick, she's an extraordinary, legendary fashion editor. She has worked with Penn and Helmut Newton. And Helmut Newton, she would pass on some of Helmut's secrets, that he used to, when he would get clothing for his subjects, he would make sure it was a size or two too small. So that they had to, the subject had to sort of, parts of their body would be sort of falling out of the clothes. So anyway, so this was Phyllis Posnick. I mean, this man and this couple are certainly amusing characters, but no one ever imagined, and including himself, that he would be the president of the United States. So the whole beginning of the book, and it's interesting because I know you picked these pictures, Vanessa, and you called them posed, but this is the beginning of the book. This is there's a small section in the beginning of the book that is kind of like the State of the Union, and it sort of is there's a lot of strange imagery going through it.
I mean, one of the things that I'm fascinated by is something you said, I think, in a previous book at work, whereas that you are putting people in the pictures at the service of an idea. So when you look at an image like that, what is the idea that you're working with?
I think it's pretty self-evident. No, actually, I over the years I've done these portfolios for the Hollywood issue, of Vanity Fair, and this particular issue, at the very beginning of the book, when it turns into, it starts going chronologically. There's a whole section on the Hollywood portraits, and this was one photograph that was really art directed by Tom Ford. Tom Ford was guest editing the Vanity Fair, and he, had a photograph from Cecil B. DeMille, directing, one of his great, films with, hundreds and hundreds of extras, and he imagined George Clooney doing this, and I thought it was brilliant, and we just, sort of borrowed it. In the scheme of things, in a portfolio, it looks great. In the scheme of the Harvey Weinstein moment, it may not look so great, So.
Okay, so speaking of Harvey,
Yes,
let's see Harvey. That's not
Oh,
Harvey.
that's
That's not Harvey.
That's how Harvey wishes he looks. This is Neil Patrick Harris, actually, who was just leaving his series, his sitcom series, and he told me he likes snakes. There's a lot of people who like snakes, but he likes snakes.
Do you like snakes?
He did
No,
and he was doing Hedgewick and the Angry Inch, and so he was in that mode, and we took this picture.
When you're working with a subject like Neil Patrick Harris or Caitlyn Jenner, for example, how much give and take, how much discussion is there about, how they're going to be portrayed? How much of it is, your idea versus their
Give and
idea?
take? What are you talking about? No.
Okay. Dictator?
No. The truth is, you're working with people, and you're working with artists and people who have a sense of themselves, not all the time, but and that's what makes my works interesting, and I'll do it till the end of time, but. You're, in this particular case, in Caitlyn's case, that really, we weren't even thinking about what the cover would look like or what the images would look like. Our team we had taken over her house, and we were totally preoccupied with getting her over the next hill, basically, just getting her comfortable with how she wanted to look, and because this is an acquired look. This is not something that she grew up with. So we had hundreds of photographs of women all over, on boards, and we were looking at different styles, and this is an outtake, from those 2 days of working with her. But you picked a set of pictures at the beginning that are very much productions and very set up, you're very engaged with the subject, and remember, I'm not standing behind a building with a long lens, hoping to. These are photo sessions, so the subject usually is very engaged, and you don't do anything that the subject wouldn't want to do.
I mean, how do you balance your idea of someone with their idea of themselves?
It seems like I'm trying to. Well, first of all, it's just a photograph, and we are very
No such thing.
and we are complicated as people, and I believe strongly that I'm doing it, one part of somebody, or a look at somebody, or a storytelling, over maybe for that moment. I think it's literally impossible to say everything you can say about someone. Because we're just complicated. In fact, in this book, and we're going to get to that at the end, there is imagery where there isn't one picture. It starts to become, Sally Mann, or who else did we have here? Where you start to see, where I run in the book, Alexander Fuller, where I couldn't really choose a image of her. It really doesn't feel like that, like there's not the decisive moment. Here, I'll click this.
And how conscious?
Oh, there he
there
is.
you go.
I said, oh my God, we've had that in the book. It's like, why did I put that in the book? I had to really sort of think about it.
Why did you?
I put it in the book because it comes at the end of the Hollywood. And of course, this is all before everything exploded, for Harvey. I put it in the book because I think subconsciously must have been, feeling that these powerful men in Hollywood are sort of brought back to being boys with their mother. And this is such an important thing that has happened, where all of this that is going on has kind of come to the surface, and things are being talked about. And I've have known Harvey as not being a nice man on some level, but so it's hard. I felt like with his mother, both of them with their mother, sort of brought them down to earth.
How much are you conscious when you are photographing, an individual, a space, of capturing it for history? Now
I'm very, very conscious of that. I'd like to have a photograph that lasts, that's for time, that lasts for time. But I think what works, what I'm finding out is the body of work is what's strong. It's not an individual picture. I feel like these photographs sort of need each other like brothers and sisters to mean something. I mean, and that's why the books. I mean, I loved photography books, since the beginning of my interest in photography and what they show us. And so the accumulation of the work, is so important.
And one of the other differences between the photographer's life and the current book is you were shooting this one almost entirely on digital camera, right?
That's right. In fact, that was if Deb Feiden's if Deb Aaronson's in the audience, we can talk about our printing escapades in China, printing this book, because it was important. We really made some breakthroughs printing digital digital files, I think, in this book. The whole book is digital, and I was determined because the digital looks so beautiful on the screen, with the light coming from the back, and I was determined to try to break some barriers and print digital so that it was really beautiful. And I think we worked really hard with with the Chinese press and came up with I think a good look. I was really surprised.
And
it was painful, Deb.
What difference does it make for you as a photographer, shooting digitally?
It's really, of course there are some differences, but I think what's really important to realize is that, I've never been a technical photographer. I think that if you do it for over 40 years or so, you should probably be technically okay, But the reality is, I am trying to figure out digital like any other photographer is, but what is important to me is the content. I've always content, composition, the photograph, and digital is a whole new. It is a whole new way of working and finding out how to work with it. It's actually a little bit more delicate than you realize. It can go out of focus very, very easily. And you don't want to know this. This is Bryce Martin.
In his studio?
In his studio. This is part of there's a whole section in the book on artists and their studios, and this is his studio, upstate, outside Tivoli, on the river, on the Hudson River.
We were talking about these pictures and the Joan Didion and the Leonard Cohen that we just saw. You called them unvarnished.
No, you called them unvarnished.
I didn't call them unvarnished. I think I called them unposed.
I'm trying to go along with this.
We agreed they're unvarnished.
Okay, we agreed.
But I wondered actually how unvarnished they actually are.
Deb? They're totally unvarnished. The book is unvarnished. No. No. I'm just being funny. I'm trying to be funny. Anyway, I think what you mean is that the other pictures feel so glossy, and these feel more real to you. I think is that.
I think they look as though they might be more real. Mm-hmm. And so my question is really:
I don't think any of it's real. But
are they exactly?
No.
Are they?
No. That's not true. I mean, I think again, I have to fall back on that whole idea that we're only going to see a glimpse. I mean, look at this this picture of Ellsworth Kelly with his studio, and see how they sort of feed each other on some level. A canvas waiting to be painted, and this might even change in context after he died. To think, is that his last? Is that a canvas that never got painted? But it actually, he was still working in the studio at the time. I thought it was so beautiful, his wall, his painted wall, but. I think it's more that you feel that if these things feel more real to you, and the others are set up, and I think that's true. That's all true. I think that there's such a great latitude in photography. I mean, there's so many things you can do with it, and I kind of enjoy. All the possibilities, and am not afraid to sort of apply a style to a person that helps bring out something that I think would either tell a good story or says something about them.
Because you also range incredibly widely across disciplines, the kind of people you shoot, athletes in action, athletes still, dancers, politicians, people who aren't known. Do you feel that it's important to have that kind of diversity for your eye?
Absolutely. Part of leaving someplace like Rolling Stone was to go to a place where, I started to work at Vanity Fair, and I was suddenly being assigned Baryshnikov and Nureyev, and it was just thrilling to me to start doing that kind of work. That was that was across the board. All kinds of people. Yes.
Do you have a preference in sort of the big sets versus something that's very small and intimate? Maybe just you with your camera and a person?
I think it depends on the person. I mean, there is a sitting with Sally Mann where it's just me and one assistant, and just working pretty much with the natural light. It just depends on the subject. Having done this a long time, it's wonderful to have a vocabulary of different ways, to work. I mean, I don't dislike the large production, but I think I like the smaller production the best, if you can do that. I constantly am working on trying to bring down, what I'm carrying around with me to as little as possible. If you walk into the Oval Office with, Barack Obama, the picture I took of him on the last day, in office, I went in by myself with just, 2 cameras, and that was it, But it just depends. It just depends. Do you want me to go to the
let's
go
to the
category?
The next category. Let's move on.
Talking about Barack Obama, this is...
There he is. You photographed him over a long period of time, most of those terms in office. Did you see an evolution in him as a subject over that time?
Well, he got he gave me less and less time. The last time I went in there, it was 5 minutes, and it was like, okay, Annie, come on, let's get this done. It's like, and that was different from working with him when he was running. I think when he was running for president at the very beginning, and I remember being outside his Chicago house, just sitting on his wall, just talking to him, and outside his house, and much more relaxed. It was different, much different when he became the president. So of course.
How much of a role does the location play for you?
It's very important. I'm not a very good studio photographer. I'm okay, but it's true. I realized when looking back at this early work, looking back at the work from 1970 to 1983, when I was just really observing and really looking, I've always tried to incorporate that storytelling into the portrait, and you can do it so much better if you're actually in a place where it means something. So I feel very uneasy in the studio. I mean, I feel like I don't have enough, because I love to observe and I love to see someone. Let me see if we have something that's a good example. This is
the Castros.
The Castro brothers. They're twins, of course, and their mother Rosie. And I did in San Antonio, and I did take them back to the house they grew up in, and they didn't live in it any longer. So it is a little bit of a, it's pushed a little bit, but this is their kitchen and the same that they grew up in, and I want to go back to their roots.
Did it change how they behaved to be in that space?
I think they were pretty consistent. They're wonderful people. I mean, I think it's interesting. I think they're very proud of their mother, and their mother is very proud of them. She's a political activist, and they wouldn't be involved in politics without their mother. And she's a very important woman in politics in San Antonio. So, I think it was a proud moment, for them to be together.
Did having worked on photographs of your own family in your previous book change how you thought about the relationships between subjects and their families?
No, it's always just been incorporated in what I've done. I know that one of my biggest inspirations for my work are my family photographs. Not me, but my mother's and my father's. And I would walk into my grandmother's house, and she would, on the piano, there would be 50 photographs in frames, and the family portrait was extremely important. The family is important. And I'm very aware of those connections, between in a family. And I actually love doing family portraits. That's what I give my friends when I want to give them something is a family portrait. It's so beautiful, to see a family together. So, but in this particular case, I think the mother is probably better known in San Antonio than her sons. I mean, she's an extraordinary figure in her own right. How many push on?
Okay, and when you're working with public figures like the Castros, like President Obama, not like this.
I'm sorry, you want me to go back?
No, it's fine. How much do they care about how their image comes out, and how much are they willing to trust you?
Well, I think politicians are a little bit different. They don't really have a sense of themselves, that much as far as how they sort of see themselves. They do have, things have changed a lot over, the 40-some-odd years I've been doing this. But then you work with someone, let's say like Hillary Clinton, she really doesn't care, what she looks like. She doesn't really have that. I mean, her people care what she looks like, but, she's very, very engaged in her work, and so I think that was true with the Obamas as well. I mean, I think Mrs. Obama has great style, and that she felt she gained confidence as the time went on, and it was beautiful to see her sort of come into herself and be more beautiful and strong than ever.
Mm-hmm. And this is.
This is this woman that was part of a program in South Africa called Mother to Mother that sort of works with women who are pregnant to make sure that the AIDS virus isn't passed on to their babies. And then what they do is they incorporate the mothers into the program, and they actually teach other women, how to, be engaged in this program and take the drugs that they need to avoid passing on the AIDS virus. So this is a woman who, Denise and her daughter, and she's pregnant again. So it was part of a series, I did in South Africa for Vogue.
Mm-hmm. How do you balance the sort of commercial side of your professional life and and your own projects? Or are they the same thing to you?
I'm not too sure what the question is, but because I think that this sort of struggle with working in a because the magazine world has its commercial aspects, and and I from the very beginning when I started to work for Rolling Stone, I went to school at the San Francisco Art Institute. And, you were taught to take a picture when you felt moved to take a picture, and no one sold their work. And I remember I got the job at Rolling Stone. I started getting work at Rolling Stone magazine, and no one was impressed with that. And it really had to, no one from school was impressed with it. You were not supposed to sell your work. So this tension of selling your work, not selling your work, doing the work, has been there since the beginning of my work, and I can't help but believe that these vehicles that I'm working within, that there's such wonderful ways to get work done that I believe I'm doing good work within a commercial landscape, and that the opportunities are too interesting, and the work is too extraordinary. But it's the tension of that, am I being too slick? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? Or is this, good? Is what creates the work, and the books to me are, a freedom highway. They are places where my real work, exists.
Okay.
Go on.
What's next? Yeah.
There seems to be a lot of punchlines in these. This is actually, it's incredible because I did photograph the Queen originally, I don't have the exact date, on the first sitting with her. But then I was asked to come back for her 90th birthday to take pictures, and it was such an amazing, you think that once you've photographed her, that would be the one opportunity. She's the most photographed, person in the world. If you do your research, you realize that, the imagery of her is just, goes over, these 90 some odd years. But it was incredible this time to go back and photograph her, because she had her ideas of what she wanted to do. She wanted to be photographed with her dogs. She wanted to be photographed with her daughter. And she wanted to be photographed with her grandchildren. Now, she didn't mention anything about her son or her husband, but this was her list, and this is what we did.
We won't tell them.
It was so charming. It was so charming.
And do you, as a woman, do you feel that you are, pioneering or a role model for other women in your field? How much responsibility do you feel to that?
I think was never so much worried or thought about it as much until I had my children. And I think about, I think there's a sitting coming up.
Let's
we can go, maybe we
see
can go to
them.
that.
Well,
That's, did you want to talk?
that could have been the last picture.
This is Hillary Clinton in the book as Secretary of State. And we had a nice working relationship. She always would say, "Annie, can I just keep working?" And I said, "Yes," and because I was just as nervous. I was more nervous than she was, of course. And I love these pictures. The sitting of her as First Lady on the veranda. She's also working and writing, and it worked because I had that opportunity to observe her and just go about doing what I do, and she was doing what she was doing.
When the ending that you wished for the book didn't happen, how did you replace it?
How did I what?
How did you replace it? How did you decide what else to do?
I can tell when the book falls apart. There's about 20 pages towards the end, and I photographed Bruce Springsteen. I said, throw him in. Okay, photograph. I said, okay. We did Oprah. I said, throw her in. It just gets to be like I know what to do anymore. And you can literally see, from I think after Twyla Tharp and Bridget, it just falls apart. And so it ends with the spiral jetty, which is this wonderful earthwork that Robert Smithson did, in the salt flats and of Utah, and it's kind of incredible because I watched it over many years. It went underwater for some time, and then it emerged. It was great, and I ripped the picture out of the paper, and it was, when I worked on Pilgrimage, I was determined to get there, and I did a series of pictures, of the earthwork. And it looks like a big question mark, and that's the end. I mean, it literally is. But we have made our way, and it was interesting. They had to literally rip the book away from me because things were changing every single day, and things were just getting, on some level not better. But we all are, as a people, think we're just not, I'm just so proud of the New York Times and the Washington Post and all the journalism that's being done and how we're on it, in a way that is really powerful, and it's an amazing time. I mean, there is an ending, but we didn't have time. We'll have to wait for the next. It's not an ending yet until something's gone, but. It's on its way to being gone because we are relentless. I mean, I'm very proud of us as a society. So we're getting there. We picked ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and I'm gonna get that guy out of there. So.
No, I think I know. I actually don't have very much more time with you before I have to open this up to the floor, because I know there are lots and lots and lots of questions that the audience wants to ask you. But I have two more, and I don't know if you want to go quickly through the rest of the pictures that we were going to look at.
By the way, this in the book runs right after the Trump photograph. It's Elvis Presley's television set, and it's in the warehouse in Graceland, and basically the story goes that anytime Elvis would see Robert Goulet on the TV, he would shoot it out. So anyway, okay. Virginia Woolf's writing table. Martha Graham's storage room, incredible. Oops, sorry. This is Alexander Fuller. Oops, I see. This is one of the. She lives in a yurt. I admire her so much. She's this extraordinary writer, and she wrote a piece for the book that's very, very incredible if you get a chance to read it. But she lives in a yurt, and she looks glamorous with her yurt and her horse and her dog, and then she looks like migrant worker when you and I just loved. She's such an incredible person. Okay, we'll go through this. Sally Mann, same thing. Not the same thing, but I mean the same kind of where it takes two photographs. David Hockney, part of the artist series. I'm sorry, we're going to get...
Took three.
And the children, it's a couple years old, but I just wanted you to see that they did grow up. I think that's... Oops, sorry. Okay, really quickly, series on Serena Williams. Okay.
Okay, given what you just said about our current State of the Union, do you think your photographs are political, and would you want them to be?
I think in the body of work, I hope it's really meant for the viewer to sort of make their own decision. Although I think I have this kind of pagination that certainly I think has a point of view. I did learn early on that I'm not really doing journalism. I'm really there's journalism in the work, but it's definitely there's a voice there and a point of view, and the book definitely has that. I mean, I don't think we can help but feel like it's political now, with what is going on. But this book has, because of its timing between 2005 and 2016, it really is the Obama era. It really is when he was a senator and then our president, and it does have a feeling that reflects that period.
How would you describe that feeling?
I think that's why I became a photographer, so I didn't have to explain it. I don't know. Oh.
All right. Well, I'll let you out of that one.
I know it's called New York Times Talks. But it's like,
Okay.
Change it to New York Times Sees?
All right, last question, and then guys, get ready. You talk in the book about maybe identifying yourself as a conceptual artist who works with photography.
Who uses photography.
Is that still what you would say?
Yeah. I think it with the digital work now, because I after I take a photograph, I sit and more or less bring the work, to life, on the computer. It feels more, I am a photographer, but I do believe that there's a very, it's on the verge of being conceptual work, and so I feel like a conceptual artist using photography.
That's good. Definition for the future. Okay. Okay, with that, we are going to open this up to questions. And we're going to start with two from our Facebook Live audience while we get the microphones set up.
Hello out there. Whoa.
Okay, this is from Annette Marie Trinidad, who says, are there any photos you wish you could retake?
Ooh, all the time. Anyone who knows me knows I want to go. Not only do I want to go back all the time, but I do go back all the time. It's not uncommon for me to in the middle to sort of think. Not in the middle of a shoot, but I'll feel like this is not going well. I need one more session. It's a little, it's not really a secret, but it is kind of a secret that it's a process, and sometimes it takes a while, and I'm not afraid to go back. But the other thing is what's interesting about the work. A picture like Joan Didion, I photographed her, several times over her life, and so when you go to take a picture again, you have all that work. That builds a foundation that when you go to.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then Lois Brothers says, "Are you ever starstruck?"
All the time. I mean, I remember all the time. I mean, I love to admire people. It's an Achilles heel, actually. I like to. I like to like people and like to admire them, and I worry that sometimes I don't have enough of an edge in my picture. But listen, if you're in a car with Bruce Springsteen and he's driving, you go, that's Bruce Springsteen. It's you're still awestruck. I mean, you have to sort of pinch yourself, and then you have to get to work.
Okay, do you want to start?
Hi, Annie. My name's Beth.
Hi.
First of all, thank you for the decades of work.
Oh, thank you.
Rolling Stone and your images have been a Bible for me as a photographer.
Oh, gosh.
I really appreciate it. I'm launching my own, going out on my own now, hanging a shingle. I've been shooting for a long time, actually have a BFA. But what have you learned over the years that you would go back and give to yourself? What advice would you give yourself as a young photographer?
It's funny because I just did that back at the last page for Rolling Stone or something, and that's the first question they asked. What would you give your advice? What advice would you give yourself? And I said, well, probably none because she wouldn't listen, you know. Which is the young photographer. But you know, I do know that having done this a long time, you just, you know, there are so many times things aren't going well. I mean, it is really, it's a relationship, and you know, you have to just keep doing it even when it doesn't feel good. That's the first thing. And the second thing is what I've said here, which is to look at your work, look back at your work and see what are you doing. I mean, when I did 1970, 1990, that book, and looked at that work and saw the early work, it really changed the work going forward for me, because I said, oh God, I really like that work. I mean, I'm not that young person anymore, but I want to incorporate it in the work. And I think that's when I started to realize I'm not going to be the great studio photographer that I admired in Irving Penn and Richard Avedon, who were just geniuses at that work, you know.
Thank you.
But good luck with your work.
Thank you.
God, that's
All right, I
great.
think we're going to go to the other side. We're going to do alternating.
Oh, hi, Annie.
Hi.
I'm feeling really starstruck right now.
Oh.
Because you're my idol.
Come here, I'll slap you around.
Listen, my name
That's
is,
what we do. Believe me, if you're around for another 10 minutes, you'll notice that nothing, it gets like...
You can slap me
kind of
around
normal.
anytime.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, my name is Marianne. I'm a photographer, and I find inspiration when I'm doing a shoot from your work. So when you're preparing for a shoot, how do you find inspiration?
I do kind of what you do. I just did a shooting with Alice Waters, and I was trying to figure out how to, because she's very sensual, and you know, I had actually photographed her about 3 times and wasn't happy with any of my photographs, and I just didn't know if I could do it again, you know. And I don't know what happened, but we were talking about, Juliet Margaret Cameron. And I started to look at some of those simple, very simple portraits of women, and it might have been, I can't remember exactly, but there was a beautiful portrait, very sensual, very strong woman, and that Julia Margaret Cameron, I mean, I don't know if you've looked at her work, but it's so beautiful and simple, and it inspired me to do this picture of Alice. Yeah, so I have a huge collection of photography books, and I have a huge vocabulary of photography in my head, and I love photography. I mean, I started off, as I explained at the beginning of the talk, you know, Robert Frank and Cartier-Bresson were important, and Diane Arbus, very, very important. You know, all that work, you know, feeds into, you know, when I did The Queen, I was looking at Cecil Beaton, and I actually said to the Queen that, you know, that I admired Cecil Beaton's pictures, and I was really using Cecil Beaton as an inspiration. And she sort of looked at me and she said, "You must find your own way," you know. Like she said, okay. But anyway.
Okay. Thank you very much.
But if I didn't look at Beaton, I turned off the lights in the room, you know, basically, and because the palace is, you know, is pretty old building, and you know, and the early work, you know, they didn't have electricity, and the light came from the windows, and it made a difference how it looked.
Oh, okay. So you find inspiration from other photographers and from the light.
Sorry,
You find inspiration from other photographers.
And the light.
And the light.
all the light. I mean, you know, in the long run, this is the art of light. You know, if you don't have good light, if you don't, I do use natural light as my inspiration. I look and see where the light's coming from, and I usually go with it. I might add a small strobe, you know, to it, but there's nothing like, you know, that natural light. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Question?
Yes, hi. So most of the pictures you showed here are about famous people and taken indoors. My question is, do you have any interest in taking pictures in nature, as well as people who are not famous?
I love landscape. I admire Lynn Davis's landscape. It was the first very emotional landscape that I saw, and I wanted to be Lynn Davis for for the longest time. Because I couldn't see a way to photograph landscape, because I always felt that nature, you can't photograph it. I always felt it was impossible to photograph. I just thought it was so beautiful the way it is. It was impossible, but there was a way to sort of express it. I like Lynn Davis's waterfall pictures. She does a long exposure, and the water, is a little blurred, and it just was. She showed me in her work how you can be very emotional with landscape. So no, on the contrary, I did a book. I did a project on basically objects and places. I went out, for example, to George O'Keeffe's 2 houses in New Mexico, to Ghost Ranch and Abiquiu, and photographed landscape that she had painted, and no, I think it's difficult. It's extremely difficult. It's not. Do you do landscape?
No,
Yeah.
I'm not a photographer, but I love nature and animals, and I love to travel. So I just look at it, not memorize it for anyone else.
Okay,
Thank you.
Question?
That is what you asked, right? I'm not a.
Yes. Hi, Annie. I loved what you said about, I think that's why I went into photography, so I didn't have to articulate like what's happening and what it is and everything.
Thank you. Yes.
I like that a lot. And I've often, I'm an academic, so I have to think and articulate a lot.
Yeah, God.
And I've often, and had to teach essays that Susan wrote. And I've often thought about, whoa, what it must have been like in your living room with those 2 brains together in the same place.
I think there was only one brain in that room. Mine was like, I think it was the dumb blonde, kind of.
So I'm wondering, like, with somebody who so articulates all the time what's going on with art and analyzing it, what, if any, effect did that have on you in thinking about your work or doing your work? No,
she was very, very important, to me when I met her, and she definitely. I've talked about this a little bit. She raised the bar, for me. I don't know if I could ever be what she wanted me to be, because she was pretty tough, but but she definitely, she went to Sarajevo and was directing Waiting for Godot and being very involved in that community during the siege, and I found myself going, and trying to take photographs there. So she definitely, but she also was extremely charming and loved popular culture. She oh my God, what was that movie with Kevin Costner, Waterworld or something? She loved that movie. It was horrible.
That's an awful
It was
movie.
like, she had the worst taste sometimes. But we, of course we miss her now.
Right.
Could you imagine what
Yes.
she would say now? I try to imagine, but it's like we need a voice like that right now. And, Gloria Steinem's great, such a, and wonderful woman, amazing. Anyway, but, no, I tell the story about the first time I went out to dinner with her, and I read the New York Times from the front to the back, just to prep myself.
Right.
And I sweated right through my clothes, sitting next to her trying to sound smart. But she's very, very, very relaxed, and kind of is There we were talking about. There's a picture of Howard Hodgkin and the painter in the book because I photographed him, and they were good friends. And you didn't want to be around when they were talking to each other because they would do these kind of intellectual ping pong things where they would see who knew more. It'd be like you'd have to leave the room because it was just too like insane. Like you didn't want to be around for that.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Next.
Hi, Annie. My name's Kiate. I'm actually a photographer from New Jersey. I just wanted to say, first of all, thanks for doing this because I never thought that this would be something I would get to do. So I appreciate that. Because of what I photograph, which is music and portraits, and because of where I live, I've actually gotten to know Danny Clinch over the last few years, and I know that he worked for you. And not too long ago, we were having a conversation. He said something to me. He basically was like, he's at a place right now where he feels comfortable in his career, and he feels like he's doing good work and he's doing a good job. So my question was, where were you when you felt like that, or are you still searching for that? Do you feel like you're comfortable in your career and you're doing good work that you're proud of at this point?
I think, one is never completely 100%, happy. I have an interesting life now because I filled myself up with my family. I have my family and I have my work, and it was interesting to depart from something like photographer's life, which had all that kind of intimacy to it, and I am still living the intimacy. Trust me, it's still there, and I have it, with my family and my children. But I'm still driven in the work, and it's like I'm surprised. I'm still trying to understand this book because we just did it. We just kind of popped it out, and I'm still trying to sort of, and I was very nervous, and I still am very nervous about it because it's all that portrait work. It's really, to me, it's the work I want to do, and so it's the first, it's like part one of this work that I want to do, the rest of my life, that I feel very dedicated to. So it's new to me. So things are, I think, you have work, and it's really important, if you have a talent. I mean, and this is something B.F. Filer told me, that you really need to take care of your work and feed it and nurture it and go to a museum, watch, do things that feed your head to keep working. So I don't think you ever feel totally relaxed. It's not the nature of it.
I feel terrible most of the time.
You're right on.
My wife.
It's perfect.
Yeah, it's.
It's bullshit. Otherwise, really. I mean, it really is. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard. You deserve to reward yourself by looking at what you've done. Stop and go and organize your work and look at it. It's like you might surprise yourself. You might surprise yourself, and then it will kickstart you to the next thing. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, unfortunately, we are almost out of time, so I think we have one last question. Okay. I'm gonna go to the.
I better make it good.
Split yourself in half.
Yeah. Good question. Ask a good question.
Hi, Annie. I'm Casey.
Hi.
You were talking about how you look back to go forward.
Right.
I'm wondering if you feel like tools like Instagram, Tumblr, Facebook, if they lend to doing that, or maybe they make you obsessed. Do you think it makes the art more accessible?
Right now, I have a place to place my work, and sometimes I look at the Instagram accounts, like Amy Schumer's. I mean, it's a full-time job. I don't know how you do that. It really is like putting out a magazine, and I think some of them are really interesting. And I'm right now not interested in it, but I think it is a great. It's a great venue, and it's a great way to create material, and it's like a diary, I guess, for some people. I'm not quite there yet, with using. I don't right now. I don't have a desire. I mean, I'm very lucky. I have a place to put work, and And I am starting, the magazines are starting to put, the Alice Waters is going straight to online. It's not going in the magazine. And I kind of like the idea that there's no timing involved and waiting for the 3-month lead time that's involved in these magazines. So I do plan to use more, and as the magazines are planning to, move over to more online.
But,
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, you've got to buy the book. It's not going to be on social media.
So that is the answer. And with that, I'm sorry, we do have to say, you want one more? One more. Okay, one more. Lucky man.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I saw your picture of Ellsworth Kelly, and you mentioned George O'Keeffe. I wanted to know if there are any living artists that inspire your work today and how that's changed your inspiration as it's gone forward.
Well, David Hockney is probably I think is just the artist of our time. I just think he's an extraordinary, and there's art in, in fashion. I was just, in the book, there's a couple photographs of Alexander McQueen's last collection. There's art everywhere. I don't know. I'm sorry, that's not a good answer. Okay.
It's all right. I have
Bruce Nauman. We love Bruce Nauman. How can you not like Bruce Nauman? Yeah.
I promised my father that I would ask you this question.
Uh-oh. Okay.
Don't worry. He's a very big fan of your work, and I told him I was coming to this, and he said one thing: how can I get my photo taken by Annie Lee Woods?
Thank you very much.
I told him I would ask.
Are we done?
Are we up? Okay. Join me in thanking Annie, please, for this great night.
Thank you for that. Okay.